Welcome to the Open Mic Podcast Show with Mike Midgley.
Hey, and welcome to the Open Mic Podcast. On today's episode, I'm excited to be covering a topic that we should all be aware of, and that is innovation. Today's influencer guest is Josh Linkner, the co-founder and chairman of Platypus Labs. And Josh is based out of Detroit in Michigan. Welcome to the show, Josh. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
No, it's awesome. And we're in Motor City. We talked about it off the show. I started my career in the mid-'80s working for Ford Motor Company as an apprentice motor mechanic. So it's not as busy as it used to be up there at the moment, is it? Or is it? Are they bringing the innovation back under the Trump administration, or is it still a little bit quieter up there in Motor City?
No, actually, Detroit is a really exciting place right now. There's a lot of momentum as car companies are shifting to become more tech companies.
Yep.
Ford, General Motors, and others are doing extremely well. And our community is really bouncing back. So it's not perfect yet, but this is a community that's on the rise, and there's a lot of activity. And I expect great things yet to come.
Yeah, well, let's hope that continues. As an ex-motor, well, I still am a motor guy at heart. I spent, 20 odd years in the trade, both went from auto mechanic to service advisor, and then I got into finance and leasing, and then run a wheeled asset finance company like the leasing companies. So, automotive and motor is still, close to my heart. But when we talk about innovation, guys, as we're listening, and running as businesses and considering it, regardless of the size of your business, the need to be an innovator, come up with new ideas, methods and solutions is essential to compete and dominate in your niche. And we're going to learn more from Josh about that in a moment. There's a great quote that the former Soviet leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, the man who led the Soviet Union from 85 to 91, and ultimately, as he took them out of the Iron Curtain, really was quoted as saying in a speech at Harvard. And that was, if you don't move forward, sooner or later, you've got to move backwards. And that's how I think about innovation. If we're not innovators, we're moving backwards type of thing. And whether that's from your political stance, your business stance, your personal lives, it doesn't really matter. That statement is such a fast-paced world today, has never been so relevant. So if you want to learn a little bit more about Josh, you can do that. You can check him out at Twitter at Josh Linkner. We'll put these notes in the app and the show notes below. So if you're driving, you don't have to stop and take these down. You can head over to Josh's company, which is platypuslabs.com. Again, we'll put that in the show notes. And of course, usual channels of Instagram and LinkedIn. You just search Josh Linkner and you're going to pick him up at Platypus Labs. You can also follow and search the hashtags creativity, disruption, innovation, and you're going to pick up Josh's content out from that side as well. So before we get started, Josh, when I read your bio, absolutely amazing bio, and, started your career as a jazz guitarist, personifies creativity, entrepreneurship, disruption, innovation, founder of a CEO of 5 tech companies, combined, which you've sold for a combined value of over $200 million. And whilst that's super impressive, I'm going to bring you back to the jazz guitar as a bit of a guitarist myself, a poor guitarist, I must say that. Tell us just a little bit about the jazz guitar first, and then let's learn about these other companies.
Yeah, so I started playing music at age 8. So I'm 49 now, so 41 years ago. And to me, it was just a passion point. I just loved music growing up. I just took to it, so I made sacrifices when my friends were going out in high school. I'm sitting home practicing. And I started playing professionally actually at age 13. I would sneak into jazz clubs in Detroit, start booking gigs and playing weddings and stuff. And but the long story short is I put myself through university playing music and learned the craft and the trade. And it's amazing, though, when you play jazz and you do startups, they're almost identical. It's a different instrument. Like, you're not playing a musical instrument. In this case, you're working on your company, but actually playing jazz music, which is an environment where you're improvising, making decisions in the face of ambiguity, having to figure stuff out as you go, is the exact perfect training ground for business leadership. And so I learned my business skills really playing jazz. And then I started my first company at age 20, and the rest has been history since. But jazz to me is a very important thing. I still play regularly. Sometimes actually when I deliver a keynote speech, I'll even include live jazz as a living metaphor for innovation.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. I love that. And tell us just quickly a little bit about the CEO roles. And obviously, I know you're sort of serial investor, serial career guy, and things like that. But 5 tech companies, obviously, I mentioned off air, we have a company that builds inbound agencies, but we also do like apps for games and children's education, things like that. So always fascinated about that. What did you learn from that tech sort of, exiting those type of companies? And, are you one of those sort of entrepreneurs who likes the thrill of the build and and to get away and then start the next thing, or do you still have interest in those companies in some way?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is that I just like the creative act of building something out of nothing, which gets back to the jazz roots. And I know that people on this podcast are building their companies and scaling them at various levels. The largest one I built, I scaled over 500 people, and we had about $100 million in revenue before I sold the firm. And so we had offices throughout the United States and in London, actually, and worked with 74 of the top 100 brands. That all sounds very glamorous, but it's the same principle that when I started my first company at age 20, and then the one after that and the one after that, which I think is identifying a real customer need, solving those problems in a fresh, creative, unique, non-traditional way, and ultimately building a culture that is around driving real value for those customers. I know it sounds rather cliche, but that's kind of what we did. In terms of what do I like to do? I kind of like to build and then eventually exit. It doesn't have to be in 10 minutes. Like, I was the CEO of my largest company for 11 years. But for me, it's funny, back to jazz for a second. This is what happened. I love starting stuff from scratch. I like the messy artist studio of an early stage company where things are very fluid and you're making decisions and you fall down a lot, you make a ton of mistakes, but you recover from them. And I got to the point where I was building my company, was very large, and it was just much slower and clunkier. Like if I wanted to do a new program, I had to bring in the legal team and bring in the metrics team, and it just became very clunky. And I read an article that actually made me change my mind about stuff. And the article was that the metaphor of leadership changes as a company grows. So in this article, not kidding, it said, early on, you're basically like playing jazz music, where everybody is small teams and you're passing the baton of leadership back and forth, and it's messy and you're improvising and you make a bunch of mistakes. But then as you grow, the metaphor shifts to that more of a classical conductor. One person who's the CEO standing in the center of the room, probably no longer playing an instrument, his or herself, conducting others. It's about accuracy and precision and playing the notes exactly as they're written. And I was feeling over the years less and less happy as my company grew bigger, not because even though the financial rewards were better, I didn't like doing the work as much. And so when I read this article, I said to myself, you know what? I'm a pretty good jazz musician. I'm only an okay symphony conductor. And so at that point, I literally brought the article to my board. I went to the board of directors and said, I think it's time for us to find a new CEO. So we did a national search. I recruited a person who moved with his family to Detroit. I became the chairman, and I was still involved in strategy all the way through our exit. But that's what I like doing, to answer your question. I like, not because I'm dying to get out of a business so much, I just like the early stages of creating something out of nothing.
No, it's great. And I get it. I understand it. I stayed with the business for 11 years and I was bored, if I'm being honest, in the last couple. The first 4 or 5, growing, raising venture capital, franchising, it was all exciting. And, like you say, it's that jazz hands type of thing. And I absolutely get it. I totally concur. So if you want to learn a little bit more about Josh is the author of 4 books, which are 2 New York Times bestsellers, Disciplined Dreaming, A Proven System to Drive Breakthrough Creativity, and The Road to Reinvention, How to Drive Disruption and Accelerate Transformation. As well as his latest book, which is Hacking Innovation. Josh is also a founding partner of Detroit Venture Partners, which is invested in over 100 startups, Josh. So talk to me a little bit. What inspired you to start writing books? Obviously, was that just a natural progression from your career, or was that something that you always wanted to do? Because as a budding author myself, I'm always trying to sort of get a feel for, what made that happen.
Well, first of all, I have a love affair with language. I just I feel language is this beautiful thing that perhaps we've lost touch of over the years, and to me, those are the notes on the page. It's the language that you use, whether it's spoken language or written language. I always did very much like writing. I'm much more of a arts and music and writing kind of guy than a math and science guy. So it was natural. But what really inspired me to write the first book was this. I believe, and I mean deep in my soul, that all of us, and I mean all of us, have enormous reservoirs of creative capacity. Yeah. And by the way, the research is crystal clear here that it's not like 1 out of 1,000 people are creative and the rest of us are not. All of us, every human being, if you're breathing, you're creative. That's the way we are hardwired. That's our natural state. But I've also realized that so many of us, to a degree, have lost our way or haven't fully developed that capacity. I believe that if each person elevated the creative output by only 5%, forget 100%, just 5%, the world changes. Like if someone who's listening right now became 5% more creative, that could be the difference between them getting venture capital or not. Or that could be the difference between them winning a giant deal or not. And so realizing that there's several billion people on the planet that have this gift of human creativity, but most of us haven't fully developed it. I went out sort of on a mission, and I feel like it's my calling, is to help people develop these skills, to reconnect, just to build that 5% more creative capacity. Again, I think the world's better. I think there's less wars. I think the communities thrive. I think businesses take off. And so that's why I wrote the book, is the intersection between, jazz music and creativity and business, putting them all together and giving people a step-by-step process to help them expand and deploy their creative skills.
Yeah. And it also shortcuts that learning process. Not a silver bullet but it shortcuts. You've got a lot of experience and you can share that with people. So highly encourage you to go and check out those books, guys. And we will put those books to Amazon and Barnes & Noble links below in the app and the show notes.
By the way, real quick, we're talking about jazz. And so when you see someone perform jazz, it looks like they plug their instrument into like God and just this inspired music just pours out. But the truth is, in jazz even, there's sort of a structure. I mean, there's certain rules of engagement. Even though only 1% of the notes are on the written page, there are some boundaries and structures and things that you learn so that you're able to sound like an effective, accomplished musician. Yeah. And so that's kind of what I did in that first book, is to say, could we build a similar scaffolding, a systematic approach that would allow people to shine with brilliant creative abilities, but didn't require them to be a super genius or to be inspired from above. Like there's a step-by-step process to play jazz. Why not a step-by-step process to bring creativity to your business? Yeah,
that's great. I love that correlation and those examples. That's fantastic. So tell me, obviously we both work in the venture markets. We're more of an intermediary in truth, Josh, where we pass our clients and high growth clients into we call a pre-approved panel of investors based on portfolio requirements, etc. So with you working in the venture markets, a lot of our listeners are looking to raise venture capital or have just raised capital or, are getting started. When it comes to innovation, what do you specifically look for from somebody who's looking to raise capital? Is there something that there's some definite do's and some definite don'ts that you could give the audience some tips so when they put their deck together or their portfolio of that first meeting, what's some do's and don'ts about, approaching a capitalist and, to get the best result?
Yeah, excellent question. And just to give you a little context, I've literally sat through 3,000 entrepreneurial pitches.
Oh, wow.
So I've seen, good, bad, and everywhere in between. A couple things. First of all, make sure that it's a dialogue. So it's not just you talking and the other person listening. Try to engage the audience a bit. Second of all, show passion around changing the world more than making money. Yeah. Most venture capitalists believe, as do I, that if you chase greatness, the money comes as a byproduct. Yeah. So if you come in guns a-blazing saying, hey, I'm going to build this thing so I can sell it real quick, that's kind of a turnoff to a venture investor. Most venture investors want to make a big difference in the world and sure, make some money as a byproduct of it. Yeah. Another thing is, if you come in and talk about how you're going to be 2% better than an existing player, forget it. Yeah. I like to call it the 10X rule. And this is a little thing that we did when we were looking at deals. We basically said the following: is there a 10X advantage somewhere? It doesn't have to only be the product. So if the product is 10 times better than alternatives, great. But maybe there's a 10X advantage in the team or the cost structure or their marketing approach or their access to raw materials. So simply put, if we walked out of that room and said, hey, there's some 10X advantage, we want to learn more. If not, not so interested. Yeah. The other thing is that we always look for novelty. Like, is someone solving a problem in the same way that everybody else has always solved it, but just cheaper? Or is someone solving it in a profoundly different and better way? Back to that 10X concept. But if they're solving, their idea is just 10X better than alternatives, again, we're interested. Yeah. A couple other things, just because I spent a lot of time doing this. We often think that the ones who will get the most investment are the people who are like the loudest speakers and the most charismatic. Sometimes it's the opposite. What we look for in people, which is, by the way, the single biggest factor in making an investment decision, not the deck, it's the people. Yeah. Are they coachable? Are they good listeners? Do they have a proven track record of being able to execute even when things go bad? Like, have they proven how they can recover from a setback? Are they open-minded? Are they humble? So when you think of the quintessential entrepreneur who's like this loud person and lights up the room, sometimes it's the more soft-spoken, humble, direct, open-minded, sincere person that is actually a better entrepreneur, especially in those early stages.
Yeah, they're fantastic tips. And you see it. And while you were speaking there, Josh, I've got all these sort of decks and all these people that we've worked with over the years. And I even look back to when we raised capital first time in 2003, 2004. And I'm thinking what I was then to what I'm now, and I've changed and morphed over. But I look at these things and most people, and one of the mistakes I see, I don't know if you see this, and I'd just love to get your intake on it, slightly off script. I do apologize, listeners. And that is that people come and say, hey, Mike, I've got this great deck and this great marketing, these great images. And sometimes I'll say to you, well, let's just put that to the side. I'm looking at the management team and I'm looking at the numbers as well. Do the numbers actually work? And sometimes they get offended because, hey, mate, we spent all this time putting this deck and these pretty things together. And it's like, yeah, I get more excited about the spreadsheet or the forecast or the forecasting tool and the management team. Is that something that how quick do you look at the numbers? Are you looking at the people thinking, yeah, that people's there, that 10x a day, straight into the numbers? Or are you looking at a slightly different sort of viewpoint?
Well, I'll tell you the way I look at it in a second, but just one comment. If someone's getting offended because the way you want to look at a deal, that's a warning sign about them. Yeah. Not about the deal, about them. So ideally, here they are trying to build a partnership where you're going to fight the battles together and you're going to be, they're just like, why didn't you look at my deck? That's a wrong question to be asking. So that to me would be a red flag out of the gate.
Yeah.
Here's the way I look at it. We actually broke it down into a rather scientific manner. It's a little funny terminology. We look at each deal on 3 factors: the horse, the race, and the jockey. Again, the horse, the race, and the jockey. So the horse, in this crude example, is the deal itself. So that's the economic model.
Yeah.
It's the product offering. It's the innovation around the idea. It's the, it's the tech, etc. The jockey is the people, not just a jockey. It's the team of men and women, the
management team,
bringing it to life. And then the race is actually the market. So is it a big market? Is it a small one? Is it a growing market, a contracting one? How big is the market opportunity? Yeah. So again, if you think about, people, the deal itself, and the market, AKA jockey, horse, and race, that's how we looked at every single deal. And we actually put a numerical score on a number of sub-factors. And we didn't make every decision just only based on those numbers, but that actually helped guide our thinking. And we'd also spot weaknesses. So we'd say, hey, I really like the product. I really like the team, but I'm a little concerned about the market. So it helped us evaluate one deal to the next by looking at them on these 3 factors.
That's amazing.
I want to make sure I answer your other question about the numbers. Absolutely, the numbers are important. Not because, and again, I think most venture investors are more about building value than just saving money on paper clips. But it's a test to see how the entrepreneur is thinking about it. So if the entrepreneur's numbers or their assumptions are so out of whack, then they're unrealistic. That's indicative of how that person is solving problems and thinking about building their business. Yeah. So I've never seen a spreadsheet that comes to life exactly, because the world never...
They're always wrong, aren't they? They're always wrong at some point.
Always wrong at some point. But what we want to do is see sound logic that is defensible assumptions and it doesn't have any glaring errors, because then the person behind it is thinking about logically. Just really quick, funny story. I look at this deal, and in year 3, they were going to do $11 billion US of revenue, according to their forecast. And they were going to have like $10.9 billion US in free cash flow. And I said to them politely, I said, Walmart, which is one of the largest companies in the world, has like 200 billion in revenue, but they only have like 10 billion in profit. So you're telling me that in 3 years, you have been the fastest growing company in the history of the world. You will achieve $11 billion in revenue, which in and of itself would be incredible. And you will be the most profitable company of any public company in the whole planet by a long shot. You will be like, 200 times more profitable than Walmart. Do you think that that's a fair assumption? And the person says to me, I know, right? I said, wait, what? What do you mean you know? He goes, that's what, I was just as surprised, but that's what it said. I said, that's what who said? He said, the business plan software. I plugged in my assumptions. That's what the business plan software said. Can you believe it? And, obviously it's a funny example, true story, 100% true. But clearly right then and there, game over. Because that person has no idea how to build a business or to build an assumption or a model that's defensive, et cetera, et cetera. So whatever your numbers are, even though you won't achieve them exactly, make sure that they are believable, that they're rational, and that there's deep thought behind them. You're not just relying on, in this case, a set of software.
Wow, that's amazing. 10 billion, that's amazing. You cheered me up on a Friday afternoon there, Josh, and it's not just me who gets the crazy whack heads who want to come in. in and change the world and do whatever. So I think that's great. But I mentioned earlier a little bit about Josh's background. Josh has been twice named the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year, and is the president of the Barack Obama Champion of Change Award recipient. So it wouldn't go amiss without sort of saying, congratulations for your success, Josh, on that. But just tell us a little bit more around those achievements.
Well, it's nice of you to say thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, for me, I still look at myself as a jazz musician, and I'm playing a different instrument. You know, I'm starting companies, I'm funding them, I'm sitting on boards, I'm writing books, but it's to a degree, that's what jazz is all about, is coming up with something that isn't there in the real world and bringing it to life. And so I'm grateful to have the ability to be creative every day. You know, the accolades are nice. Honestly, in my career, I'm very grateful for those and grateful for financial success. I'll tell you, the real reward for me, though, has been when someone walks in and says, "Hey, Josh, I just started at the company a couple years ago. You don't maybe don't even know my name, but my husband and I just bought a house. And just so you know, we're the first homeowners in our entire family on either side in many generations. Thank you for the opportunity." Yeah. And of course, my response is, look, you did that, not me. I'm grateful that you work here. But the idea that you're making a positive impact in other people's lives, whether it's your customers or your team members or your partners, that to me has been the real juice as I've gone. And again, I keep getting back to this, but the money follows as a byproduct. Yeah. When I've been in situations where I'm just chasing the almighty dollars and cents, I rarely get it, frankly. But when I'm doing something that has meaning and purpose, and it's going to make a real impact in others' lives, then the money really comes as a byproduct. And I think that's a great way for us entrepreneurs to think about it.
Yeah, there's a great saying out there by Jim Rohn, isn't there, where he says, set yourself a goal to become a millionaire. He says, not for the money. That's automatic. He says, it's for what you learn and the type of person you become to actually achieve that goal. The money is, like you say, a byproduct, or it becomes automatic. And I think he goes on to say, once you do that, then go and give it all away, and then you'll see the real value of it. So I love that. Finally, Josh is a regular columnist for Forbes, Detroit Free Press, Inc. magazine, all working on innovation. And you've been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Josh, Harvard Business Review, CNN, New York Times, but you still, that love for the jazz guitar keeps coming back in, which I absolutely love. As I say, if you want to check out Josh and his team, head over to platypuslabs.com or search out Josh on Twitter at Josh Linkner. So the sort of context of the show, Josh, really is innovation. We can see that passion and that drive, absolutely infectious. I can feel it coming through. It's absolutely amazing. So for the audience, as I say, are sort of high growth entrepreneurs, the ones who are either raising capital, looking to, or just got capital, we all need to innovate, as we said earlier. What are the specific techniques we can use to harness our most powerful ideas? Well, how would you approach that, and the guidance you'd give people?
Sure. I just want to touch on one thing real quickly, and then we'll answer your question directly. And you're talking earlier about these achievements, like Entrepreneur of the Year award, and those are nice, and you have a big banquet and you hold a trophy up. You know what the real achievements are for all of us, not just me, is our failures. Yeah. We should really celebrate those way more than we celebrate, getting some award. So if you were to say what I'm proud of how I got knocked on my face and I'm bleeding on the canvas and I got back up into the fight. Or I lost, there's a couple of times we lost tons of money. I mean, I've made some good money. I'm very proud of that. But there's been cases we lost $10 million, and this stings, and it's painful and horrible, and you feel like you're a loser. But when you get back up into the fight, those are the moments that we should be proud of, all of us as entrepreneurs. The thing about even the word entrepreneur, I sometimes don't like because it sounds very fancy. Like you're wearing white gloves and you're having tea out on the veranda. That's not what entrepreneurship is. Entrepreneurship is being a street fighter. Being an entrepreneur is you have some idea, you're all excited about it, you walk out on the street and someone punches you in the face. Then you get back up and someone kicks you in the ribs and you're bleeding and you're clawing your way up and you can't breathe. That's what being an entrepreneur is. Entrepreneur is a fist fighting activity. And that's how I think we should think about it as entrepreneurs. So yes, let's celebrate the wins. If you bought a brand new car, awesome. I'm all in favor of it. But also realize that it's those setbacks and how we overcome them. That is the real magic of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. And it is the reality. I did a podcast earlier today where we're talking about the iceberg effect. And, only people see the tip of the iceberg, which they see the success, as you rightly point out. They don't see how much pedaling you've got to do underneath. And like you say, they don't always see the losses. And it is a full circle for sure. So talk about... And
I'll tell you about the ideas, but just on that point, because I know people listening are building their companies. And it's hard. You see someone who's successful, you see Steve Jobs, or you see someone way less successful like me. me, and you think that, hey, we always got it right. Like we never made a mistake. We never screwed something up. That's never the case. I've had the chance to interview billionaires and the most successful people on the planet. And yeah, they win more, but guess what? They fail more also. Yeah. And I fail all the time. We're in the middle of a project right now. We have a new tech startup and we just screwed something up royally. The point I'm making is that if you listening to this are having some adversity or screwing something up, don't beat yourself up. Don't think you're the only one that's ever made a mistake. That's the act of being an entrepreneur. So I would just encourage you to find creative solutions to get back into the fight. Don't throw up your arms in defeat.
Yeah, absolutely. Great.
Anyway, I'm sorry, back to your question. So how do you become more creative? Well, a couple things. First of all, when you screw something up, back to those failure points, try to not look at it as judgment, but more like data. Yeah. So you say, okay, that didn't work, but just think of it as an experiment. If you happen to be in the development of drug therapies for curing disease, no one's ever walked in the lab with an idea and like tried one test and like, yep, that's it, ready to go. Never, ever, zero. What happens is they do hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands of failed experiments before they get it right. So please realize on this podcast that ideas aren't something magical that comes to you in the shower and then they're perfect and prime time and bulletproof and ready to go. Ideas directionally are interesting, but then it's a little tweaks and adaptations, the experiments and setbacks. I call them micro innovations along the way. That's where the real creativity comes, not coming up with the one giant idea. It's the 1,000 ideas that goes along the way to bring that one idea to life. So that's the first thing, is don't think of creativity as a single bolt of lightning. Think of it as lots of little failed experiments ultimately landing on something good. Yeah, that's brilliant. I would just say is a quick technique. The biggest blocker of human creativity by far is not natural talent, it's fear. Yeah. So fear is the poisonous force that holds us back and robs us of our best thinking. So in other words, you might be in a meeting with your colleagues and you have a great idea, but instead of sharing the idea, you hold it back, because you don't want to look foolish or you don't want someone to criticize your idea. So here's a simple technique, you asked for a technique, that completely removes the fear. The technique is called role storming. Role storming. And this is one of the techniques that I covered of many in my books. But the idea is brainstorming in character. Right. The problem is a regular brainstorm session is a perfectly designed exercise to yield mediocre ideas, because everybody shares their safe ideas, but they hold their crazy ones back. Role storming absolves you of all responsibility because you're playing the role of somebody else. So for example, let's say you were playing the role of Steve Jobs. No one's going to laugh at Steve for coming up with a crazy idea. They might laugh at Steve for coming up with a small one. So now you are liberated. You can say anything you want. There's no fear whatsoever. You've got the permission. Very simple. Everyone in the room is taking on an actual real world problem, but everyone chooses a character. One person could be Prince Harry. The next person could be Austin Powers. The next person could be Darth Vader. And pick a hero, a sports figure, a movie star, it doesn't matter. And you pretend that you are that person solving the problem. I know it sounds goofy, but I'm just telling you right now, your creativity will go through the roof because all the fear leaves the building. Yeah, amazing. I know there's a statement from Edison, isn't there, where he said, when he invented the incandescent light bulb, but he said, I had to succeed because I'd run out of reasons to fail. It's like 10,000 failures before he actually got the thing to light up and work, type of thing. So it's great, but I love the role storming. That's absolutely amazing idea. Just a matter, Josh, which book is that in, just so we can take a reference on that? That one is in Disciplined Dreaming, and we cover dozens of ideas like that. Just another much quicker one, but just we're talking about it. Instead of trying to brainstorm a good idea, try the bad brainstorm exercise. In other words, everyone's in a room saying, all right, we got to drive more revenue for our company and win these types of customers. Before you try to come up with good ideas, everyone brainstorms the worst ideas they can find. It's a bad brainstorm sprint. What's unethical? What's immoral? What's illegal? Brainstorm the worst ideas you can think of. So then you get them all out there. Everyone's laughing. It's really fun. But then you look at that list, and step 2, you do what we call a legit flip. Yeah. In other words, is there some value in your inappropriate idea that you could flip to make it a keeper? And so what this does is it pushes your thinking so far away from the norm, and then you might have a nugget or two on that page that you can tone down and make it something that you actually can put into action. So all you're doing is 2 steps. First step, brainstorm the worst idea. And then the second step, evaluate those bad ideas and see if you can flip any of them into
Take something out of it. Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And do you know, when you look back, it's like anything with the wood for the trees. When you sit back and look at it, you think, yeah, that's crazy, because, take out the illegal thing and stuff like that. There may be something salvageable out of that process that, before it becomes illegal or before it becomes wacky crazy, that you could take over and brilliant. Absolutely love it. You're diamond. So when we talk about, how do we apply creativity on a daily basis across all business activities and roles? There's so much to get done as an entrepreneur. You could be wearing many hats and, obviously the pressures, whether you've got investors or you're just trying to get investors or whatever. What's the best way to apply creativity? I mean, we've done the role play stuff there as well. What other stuff would you recommend there, Josh?
Well, one thing I would try to do as leaders is to build a culture of innovation where everybody's job is to be an artist. So if you have 2 people in your startup, or 20 or 200 or 2,000, whatever your headcount is, that's the exact number of people that should be thought of as artists. So in other words, if someone is sitting in a customer service role, you wouldn't ordinarily think about them needing to be innovative. You think about only people who are innovative are the CEO or someone wearing a lab coat. But I think the best companies, entrepreneurial companies, are those where everybody innovates. That's the rule. Everybody innovates. But you do so in the context of your own job. So if you're a customer service person, how can you be more innovative in solving customer service problems? If you're writing code, how can you be more creative in your approach to writing code? If you manage the office, how could you use inventive thinking to manage the office more efficiently? And so I love this idea of big little innovations or big little breakthroughs. Instead of only going after the giant game-changing, the industry is now a different situation, go after the little ideas. What if each of us cultivated 5 teeny ideas a day? Yeah. First of all, they're less scary. You're not going to get in trouble for a little idea. You can put them into practice all the time. You can come up with 30 a week, 29 of them stink. So what? You got a nice little one that stays. Great. Awesome. So I love this idea, especially for smaller entrepreneurial companies, is that when you hire people, say, look, you have a primary role. Your primary role is whatever your business card title says. But you also have a secondary and equally important role of being an artist and an innovator and a creator and an inventive thinker. And so if you build a culture where everybody's ideas are celebrated, where all the fear is gone, where people's responsibility is to do things in fresh, innovative ways, you build a killer company that's going to get funded and grow and win.
Yeah, that's amazing. Absolutely. And I love the little ideas about the micro ideas and them, because like you say, even if, like you say, 1 out of the 30 sticks, you move forward, the impact's there, the customers feel it, the staff feels it. And you can, I'm not about ringing the bell, but you can say, hey, we've taken that step forward. And, if you celebrate the little wins, we see also often in business, don't we, where people are, like you said, they're going out for the great white shark of a catch, but sometimes catching some of the tuna, catching some of the minnows, and the smaller fish gives you that confidence to go to that second level or third level to then put yourself in a position to maybe go after the bigger stuff at a later date. So I love the little win sort of, example syndrome. That's amazing. Thank you.
By the way, that's how you get the big ideas. So here's the scenario. Let's say you're a leader. Someone comes to you with a bad idea. And the first thing you say is, oh, that's a terrible idea. Go back to your cube. You've just trained that person to never share another idea again.
Yeah,
Instead, I'm not saying you should lie and say it's a good idea, but just engage in a non-judgmental conversation. You might say something like, well, tell me more about that idea.
Yeah,
what was the thinking that led you to this? Is there something else you could add to it to make it even better? Now the person goes back to their desk feeling validated and understood. And by the way, they may come back with 4 or 5 bad ideas in a row. So what? But then they may show up with that 6th idea, the game-changing idea, the idea that creates $1 billion of market value that would have never come to the surface in most organizations. So I think as leaders, if we want to get the big ideas, we have to have a healthy appetite for bad ones. We have to cultivate the little ones. Those in turn lead to the biggest breakthroughs.
Yeah. And, ultimately that employee, like you said, if they go back to the cubicle and they feel, obstructed or not valued, they may actually leave and take those ideas to another company, which could be a competitor. So you could be losing twice there as well. So exactly. Love that. Thank you so much, Josh. When we talk about the best way to challenge assumptions and conventional wisdom, talk to me a little bit more about that and how the entrepreneurs of today can deal with that.
Too often when I've seen entrepreneurial pitches, they take somebody else's big idea and they just add a teeny little twist to it. Yeah. So if someone comes in and pitches like, hey, this is just like eBay, but it's got a different color palette. What they're pitching is they're not pitching a business, they're pitching a feature. All right. eBay, if let's say that was the greatest color ever, eBay could just change the color and win. Yeah. So I don't think that incrementalism is sufficient to get funding, let alone build an entrepreneurial business, because the deeply entrenched existing competitors are just going to be too fierce and gobble it up. So I think what you really need to do as you're building your entrepreneurial business is challenge the norms and conventions of the business. If I was starting a law firm, I'd say to myself, well, what do law firms look and act like? Well, they have mahogany desks. They have people in three-piece suits with Windsor knots. So I'd say, well, what's the opposite? And here's the thing you should ask. What's the opposite? So I'd say, well, what if you had a law firm where everyone was wearing a black turtleneck and you walk in and there's like beautiful art on the walls and it was really sleek and it felt like you're in a modern gallery. You know what? You might alienate 20% of your customers. Fine. That's okay. I like the idea of being selectively polarizing because the other 80% will fall in love and you stand out from the competitive set rather than blend in. So I think as entrepreneurs, we have to take a hard look at the norms, things you've always done, the core assumptions of an industry, what the competitive set is doing, and then line by line, ask yourself, what's the opposite? What's the polar opposite? What is the exact, completely different position? So instead of trying to blend in, instead of hiding inside the flock, our goal as an entrepreneur is to stand out, to focus on what makes us different, not what makes us the same.
Yeah, brilliant. There's a professional services firm in Leeds where we have one of our other agencies, and they've actually got like a tennis court inside their office. And the professional services guy, wow, like you say, I'm not quite sure the three-piece suit these days. There's a lot of lose the tie sort of techniques going off at the moment. But traditionally, you're right. You're saying that your lawyers, accountants, management consultants, to a degree, they've got that stigma and that sort of look and feel around them. And you walk into that place and they've got tennis balls and tennis court. It's not a full-size one, but it's like artificial grass, tennis court out, the net in there. And it's just like, wow, these guys get it. I'm a young entrepreneur or I'm an upcoming entrepreneur. I don't want that stuffy feel, maybe that's been too unkind to some of the professional services. I apologize. But, ultimately, they have that. And, on their walkway past the Leeds High Street where the windows are, you see it. You walk past it, you see it in there. They've not hidden it way on the fourth floor. They put it on the ground floor near the reception where people walk past and think, is that a professional services company? Yes, it is. Okay, there's a tennis court in there. So I get that. I understand it. And, that particular company is doing very, very well. And they're differentiating themselves for sure. So love you sharing that idea with us. So what are and how to avoid the five biggest creativity killers? What are the five and how do we avoid them, Josh?
Well, there's a number of them. As mentioned, first of all, fear is the biggest blocker of creativity, period. And so anything that we can do as leaders to remove the fear from the room, you will liberate the creative capacity of your team. If people, simply put, fear and creativity cannot coexist. So if there's fear in the room, there's no creativity. So again, techniques like role storming are a good way to overcome that. Another trap is extinguishing an early idea too quickly. If you were to light a match and you can blow it out super quick, too often we extinguish our early ideas before they have a chance to really catch fire. Yeah. And so what I would say is also spot that sometimes the best ideas come from another idea. Like it's the idea that leads to the idea, leads to the idea. So my suggestion would be that it's a trap is to extinguish ideas too quickly. It's to let those ideas mature a little bit, give them some breathing room before killing it, because one idea may lead to the next, which may lead to the next. Another big trap is this notion where the person with the fanciest title or the loudest voice is the one that wins every argument. And I would really recommend that people think about the best, building a culture where the best idea wins. It's what's right, not who's right. And that whole idea of letting sort of democratizing innovation and letting everybody bring their best thinking to the surface, not only celebrating what the boss has to say.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And a couple other ones. I mean, so one trap that we fall into very often is incrementalism. So all we're doing is saying, you put a filter on your ideas saying, as long as I can do it with the resources that I already have, or as long as I can do it where my boss won't be mad at me, or as long as I can see a real clear path to get there. I would really suggest that people start with the notion of what's the ultimate solution and then figure out how to get the resources to support it. So you start with the end in mind rather than just inch your way from where you currently are. Yeah. So hopefully those are some traps and tips that can help you work through them.
Do you know what? The one that we see all too often, even I will fall into this, and I'm the first to raise my hand and admit when something flashes by and you got to sometimes just take a stand. And, I know we're doing this on public forum. It goes out all over the world on all the apps stations. But, what I love about what you say there, Josh, is it's, what's the best idea wins, not whose idea it wins. And just because you're the boss or you've got the fanciest title, like you say, or whatever. And I see, and I've been guilty of that in my past. You maybe, not from an egotistical point of view, but you think you maybe don't have that trust or faith in that other idea. So you want to maybe spin it your way a little bit. it. And I've done that. And, that's a wake-up call for me on the show today. So thank you for that. And I sort of raise my hand and say, yeah, I've been guilty of that. But I think that is, because I think there is so many good ideas in businesses, but either they get, snuffled out too early is one, but ultimately the boss overruling it and saying, this is the way. And, in the old days, it was, in the automotive industry, it was my way or the highway, you know what I mean? And that's just not where it is. A lot of people's got a lot of value. So if you're selling your business today and, you are overruling your staff, take a time out. Just take 5 minutes out, go and sit in the reception area, go and jump in your car, go to Starbucks, whatever you want to do, and go and ask yourself the question, how many times are you overruling a decision that would be better because of either ego or pretentious or whatever it would be? Shoot me a debate on there. Use the hashtag #TheOpenMic or leave me a comment below, and I'd love to engage in a debate with you. I'll show you some of the mistakes I've done. I'll start. I've made quite a few of those, and I really should have taken a step back. So what I would say, Josh, thanks for calling me out on that one. That was directly to me. I appreciate it, and let me see if I can put that right a little bit. So as we wrap out on the questions, how to build a culture that celebrates that fresh thinking and embraces new ideas. I know we've talked about the role plays, we've talked about, the bad brainstorming, and we've talked about having that inclusions, and there's so much value in there. But if we were to just, focus this down to build that culture that celebrates fresh thinking, what else can you add to that for us, Josh?
Sure. The best thing you can do is build rituals and rewards around the desired behaviors.
Yeah.
So if you just say to everybody, hey, I want you to be all creative, but you don't reinforce that and support it with rituals and rewards, it's just going to be forgotten.
Yeah,
a couple quick examples. If you want people to push the boundaries in creativity, here's some things that companies that I've researched have done. One company that I know issues every team member 2 corporate get out of jail free cards every year. Here's what they say. They say, go out on a limb, try crazy creative stuff. If you screw something up, hand us a card, you're off the hook, no questions asked. On an annual review, a leader will be disappointed with a team member if they haven't used both of them. Oh, wow. You might say to yourself, gosh, that feels very risky, but my challenge back, what's the risk of not doing something like that? Mediocrity? Getting passed by? Another quick ritual example. A large company that I was working with wanted to get the notion out that they wanted everybody's ideas. They want every idea matters, but they didn't want people to be discouraged because obviously if you got like 10,000 ideas in one day, you can't do them all. So they built a visual cue around this concept. Here's what they did. In their corporate headquarters, in this big visible area, they take 4-foot-tall glass jars. Anytime an idea comes in, anywhere in this global company, a white marble goes in the jar. Anytime an idea is embraced, they put a red marble in the jar, and they save the jars over the years. Wow. So thousands of people walk past this lobby every day, and they see a whole wall filled with white marbles with little specks of red. And what this is a visual cue, telling people just in one quick glance, takes a lot of white marbles to get to a red one, takes a lot of bad ideas to get to the good ones, keep them coming, every idea matters. Yeah. So the suggestion for those on the phone is, if you have a desired behavior, like being creative or pushing the boundaries or using inventive thinking, reverse engineer rituals and rewards that will incent that behavior to occur.
Yeah, I love that, because it's saying, look, and another way it's saying is, look, we can't adopt them all, but, the white and the red, just by the vast, correlation of the difference of numbers is doing that. But it is encouraging them still to keep going. That's amazing. I really, really appreciate it. When we're talking about, slightly off script as we wrap out, Josh, that build a culture, we've talked about the rituals and rewards. Is that something you're asking people? I'm sure you're assessing the management team and the culture when you're making the investments, but are you sort of pushing them and asking them, if you see like a great idea, great debt, great management, the coachable, the listening, the humble, all those things that, you mentioned there, they're not the minimalism stuff, they're looking at the opposite. But there's something missing there. Are you actually pushing them and saying to them, go back and build this in and then come back? Talk to me about how, for somebody who's maybe hit a couple of brick walls, the standard approach is, it's not for us, or it's not quite there, there's a couple of bits missing or whatever. What are you saying to them to sort of go back to refine it and bring it back if they're missing that? Are you giving them these type of ideas, or are you sort of planting the seed and seeing what they come back with, see how creative they are? Just love to sort of get your ideas on that.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you brought that up. If you pitch a venture capitalist and get rejected, it doesn't mean you're rejected forever. It's just you're rejected at that moment. Yeah. And so if you built a nice rapport, you might say to them, hey, is there some tweak or twist that you might want to see that we could revisit the conversation. Now, all of a sudden, the venture capital is probably going to light up. They're going to be like, oh, have you thought about this? What about that? And so then it becomes this dialogue. You may have 3 or 4 meetings with them over the coming months, and now they actually have personal ownership in your success. You have a much higher chance of them funding you. So don't look at it as binary, yes or no. Definitely see if you can engage. I've done that many times. One entrepreneur came to me. I love the person. I thought he needed a little work. So I sent him back with some ideas. He came back. There were several meetings back and forth. I ended up funding his business. He was the CEO of it. Get this, it didn't work out. Like the business didn't work, but we loved him so much. We funded him into a next business. And I'm not kidding. That business is today literally in print worth over $1 billion.
Wow.
So he came with an idea that wasn't right. He went back to the drawing board with my guidance. We funded him. This business still wasn't right, but now he's running $1 billion company. So don't look at it as a yes or no experience with your venture investor. Look at them as a potential really strong advisor and partner in crime, someone who's seen a lot of patterns they can give you advice on that may be able to elevate your business. A great venture relationship provides way more than a checkbook. It provides smart minds that are going to help you win.
No, that's amazing advice. And for you guys out there who are in that process now, shoot us a message. And again, if you want to connect with Josh, connect with him on LinkedIn, on Twitter. We'll put the links below. If you've got a question, but I'm sure Josh would be happy to at least have a look at that in his schedule, or send them through to me. Use the hashtag #DealMike, and we'll get those filtered into Josh. I really appreciate that, Josh. The value. My notebooks is absolutely full. It's ripped out there. I've got a lot of debriefing to do for myself as well. The value provided, Josh, is absolutely immense. Thanks for sharing the stories. Congratulations on your success again. And for the listeners who are inspired about innovation and about the things that we've discussed today, if we were to sort of compress and compact them into 3 sort of pro tips, people, entrepreneurs looking at innovation, looking at funding, what would be the 3 main key core tips or pro tips that you would ask them to sort of focus on to get the best possible results?
Yeah, great. Number 1, mistakes are not fatal. They are the portals of discovery.
Yeah.
And so really think through as you're screwing things up, because you will, and you're scraping up your knees, what can you learn from it? How can you improve next time? Number 2, fall in love with the problem that you're trying to solve, not your solution.
Yeah.
So if you fall in love with, like, I love this tech solution, don't think of your business that way. Think about the problem that you're solving for customers and be willing to be flexible and creative along the way, tweaking the how you get there, but fall in love with the problem, not your solution.
Love it.
And number 3, think about this notion. This is something that I said all the time as I built companies. Someday a company will come along and put you out of business. It might as well be you.
Yeah.
And I believe in that principle that all of us need to be in a constant state of reinvention. And that applies to our companies, but it also applies to ourselves as leaders and entrepreneurs. I try to put the Josh of 6 months ago out of business with a new version. And so rather than us thinking as entrepreneurs, because many listening, I'm sure, are successful, success is a temporary state. Yeah. And it's in the context of many external factors that today are changing at a rate like none other in history. So my suggestion is use your success to leap from one point to the next, always reinventing and changing as you go, because we're living in these unprecedented times of change. So again, fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Reinvent early and often, and make sure that those mistakes are gifts. Those are learning opportunities, not something to be ashamed of.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. Even more value there crystallized down into those 3. Josh, could you just recover that first one? Mistakes are not fatal. They are, what did you just cover that for me? If you could.
I said they are the portals of discovery. Yeah. And we see this again and again. When you really study great entrepreneurial successes, they usually were born from a whole bunch of mistakes. I've talked to, there's a great line in the literary world. What do all great authors have in common? Terrible first drafts. So the point is that those screw-ups, that's just part of the process. If you don't have the stomach for the screw-ups, you don't have the stomach to succeed. So rather than looking at those as something like, oh, it's judgmental, I'm a terrible person, I shouldn't be here, that's just part of the process. In fact, if you're not making mistakes, you're not growing fast, period.
No, that's great. Fantastic. Josh, I really appreciate it. It's immense value. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day today. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you again. Congratulations on your success, and keep driving such great positive insights into the world.
No, we're doing as best. So we try and class it as a public service, the Open Mic podcast. It's my favourite part of the week when I record the podcast, learning and meeting, successful and people around the world and sharing it as a public service is what we do. So for you guys who's listening, I hope you've had a tremendous amount of value of that today. Thank you very much indeed for tuning into the show, taking the time to listen to the amazing insights that Josh has shared. We appreciate you continuing your growth engine development. As always, to get in the game, go do the hustle, go make it happen, take action, and we're going to see you on another Open Mic podcast real soon.
You have been listening to The Open Mic, brought to you by The Success Hub. To find out more and to get the resources we have mentioned in this podcast episode, simply visit blog.thesuccesshub.io and view the podcast section. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to catching up with you in our next episode. This podcast and associated materials is published under copyright to The Success Hub. All rights reserved. No reproduction of this material is permitted.